The cardboard beneath my knees was already soaked through when I heard the baby crying. I'd been crouched behind this dumpster for 20 minutes, waiting for the rain to ease up enough to make it back to my car, when that thin wail cut through the drumming on metal above my head. It wasn't the angry cry of a hungry infant. This was weaker, more desperate. The sound a baby makes when it's been crying too long and doesn't have much left. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. I pushed myself up on arthritic knees, my 73-year-old body protesting every movement. The rain had turned the alley behind Mercy General Hospital into a shallow river, and I could smell the mix of wet concrete and something else, something that reminded me of camping trips from decades ago. Canvas. Wet canvas. That's when I saw the tent. It was wedged between two dumpsters about 30 feet away, a small dome of faded blue fabric that looked like it had seen better years. The crying was coming from inside, along with a woman's voice, soft and broken, trying to shush the baby with words I couldn't quite make out over the rain. My heart did something strange in my chest. I'd been volunteering at the hospital for 15 years, ever since Harold passed, and I'd seen plenty of heartbreak. But something about this scene, the makeshift shelter, the desperate crying, the way the woman's voice cracked when she spoke, it pulled at something deep inside me. I should have minded my own business. Should have gotten in my car and driven home to my warm house with its full refrigerator and soft beds. Instead, I found myself walking toward that tent, my sensible shoes squelching in the muddy water. "Hello?" I called out, trying to make my voice gentle despite having to speak over the rain. "Are you all right in there?" The crying stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the wailing had been. "We're fine," came a woman's voice, muffled by the tent fabric. But there was something in that voice, a tremor, a note of panic barely held in check. "Please we're fine." I stepped closer, and that's when I caught sight of her through a gap in the tent flap. Just a glimpse of a young woman's face, pale and gaunt, with dark hair plastered to her skull from the dampness. She was holding a bundle against her chest, the baby, I realized, and rocking back and forth in a rhythm that spoke of desperation rather than comfort. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. Even in the dim light filtering through the tent fabric, even with the rain distorting everything, I knew those eyes. I'd looked into them 1,000 times when they were bright with childhood laughter, when they were rolling with teenage exasperation, when they were shining with tears over scraped knees and broken hearts. "Emma." The name fell from my lips like a prayer. The rocking stopped. The young woman's head snapped up, and for a moment we stared at each other through that gap in the tent. Her face went white as bone, and the baby in her arms let out another weak cry. "No," she whispered, and her voice was the same as it had been when she was 7 years old and afraid of the monster under her bed. "No, you're dead. Daddy said you died. He said you died when I was 12. My legs nearly gave out. I gripped the edge of the dumpster to steady myself, feeling the cold metal bite into my palm through my gloves. Emma. My granddaughter Emma, who I hadn't seen in 15 years. Who I'd been told wanted nothing to do with me after her mother, my daughter Sarah, passed away. Who her father, my son-in-law Marcus, had said blamed me for everything that went wrong in their family. "Emma, sweetheart," I managed, my voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm not dead. I'm right here." She was shaking now, the baby clutched so tightly against her chest I worried she might hurt the little one. Her eyes, those familiar brown eyes that were so much like Sarah's, darted back and forth like a trapped animal looking for escape. "This isn't real," she said, and I could hear the hysteria creeping into her voice. "This isn't real. You're dead. You've been dead for years. Daddy showed me the obituary. He showed me your grave." The rain seemed to get heavier, drumming against the tent with increasing fury. Water was starting to pool around my feet, and I realized that their makeshift shelter was probably flooding. But I couldn't move, couldn't think about anything except the impossible sight of my granddaughter, my beautiful, lost granddaughter, living in a tent behind a hospital with a baby in her arms. "Emma," I said again, taking a careful step closer. "I don't know what your father told you, but I'm alive. I've been alive this whole time. I've been looking for you." That was a lie, but only partially. I had looked, in the beginning. But Marcus had moved them away when Emma was 13, and every attempt I'd made to contact them had been met with legal threats. Eventually, I'd given up, telling myself that maybe it was better this way. Maybe Emma really was better off without the grandmother who'd failed to save her daughter from the cancer that took her too young. Now, looking at this broken young woman living in a tent with a baby, I realized how wrong I'd been. Emma was crying now, silent tears mixing with the rain that had started to seep through the tent fabric. The baby in her arms had gone quiet again, but it was the wrong kind of quiet, the exhausted silence of a child who'd learned that crying didn't bring help. "I don't understand," Emma whispered. "I don't understand any of this. If you're alive, then why didn't you come for me? Why didn't you find me when Daddy lost the house? When we had to move into the car? When the baby came and we had nowhere to go?" Each question hit me like a physical blow. Lost the house? Living in a car? And there was a baby, my great-grandchild, who looked far too thin and pale in the dim light. "I didn't know," I said, and the words felt inadequate, pathetic. "Emma, I swear to you I didn't know. Your father told me you never wanted to see me again. He said you blamed me for your mother's death." "Blamed you?" Emma's voice cracked. "Why would I blame you? You were the only one who was there for us when Mom got sick. You were the only one who—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes going wide with a realization that seemed to hit her like a physical force. The baby started crying again, a weak, hungry sound that made my chest ache. Emma looked down at the little one, then back at me, and I could see her mind working, putting together pieces of a puzzle that was apparently much larger and more twisted than either of us had realized. "The money," she whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear her over the rain. "Oh God, the money. What money, sweetheart?" But before she could answer, I heard footsteps splashing through the water behind me. Heavy footsteps, moving fast. Emma's eyes went wide with terror, and she scrambled backward in the tent, clutching the baby. "Emma!" A man's voice shouted over the rain. "Emma, where the hell are you?" I turned around, and my blood turned to ice. Marcus. My son-in-law, looking older and harder than I remembered, his face twisted with rage as he spotted me crouched by the tent. He was soaked to the skin, his clothes hanging off a frame that had grown thin and wiry over the years. "You," he snarled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "What the hell are you doing here?" Behind me, I heard Emma make a sound that was half sob, half whimper. The baby's crying intensified, as if sensing the tension in the air. "I could ask you the same thing," I said, standing up slowly and turning to face him. "Why is my granddaughter living in a tent, Marcus? Why does she think I'm dead?" His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, fear, anger, and something else. Something that looked almost like guilt before it was quickly masked. "She's not your granddaughter anymore," he said, but there was something hollow in his voice. "You lost that right when I what?" I interrupted, taking a step toward him. "When I tried to help Sarah through her cancer. When I paid for her treatments. When you tried to steal my family," he shouted, and spittle flew from his mouth. "When you tried to turn my wife against me with your money and your—" "Daddy, stop." Emma's voice was barely audible, but it cut through his rant like a knife. She had crawled to the front of the tent, still holding the baby, and was looking up at both of us with an expression I couldn't read. "Just stop." Marcus's face softened when he looked at her, but there was something desperate in his eyes. "Emma, honey, you need to come with me now. This woman, she's not who you think she is. She's dangerous. Dangerous." I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. "Marcus, I'm 73 years old. The most dangerous thing I do is drive to the grocery store." "You don't understand," he said, and now he was backing away, his eyes darting between Emma and me. "You don't understand what she did. What she tried to do to our family." Emma was staring at him with an expression that was growing more and more confused. "Daddy, what are you talking about? Grandma Helen never did anything to hurt us. She loved Mom. She loved me. She tried to take you away from me." Marcus's voice was rising to a shout again. "After your mother died, she wanted to take you away. She said I wasn't fit to be your father. She said—" "That's not true." The words came out of me with quiet certainty. "I never said that, Marcus. I never tried to take Emma away from you." But even as I said it, I was remembering those awful months after Sarah's funeral. The way Marcus had seemed to spiral, drinking too much, staying out too late, leaving 13-year-old Emma to fend for herself more often than not. I had been worried. I had suggested that maybe Emma could stay with me for a while, just until Marcus got back on his feet. Had he seen that as an attempt to steal his daughter? You did, he said, but his voice was quieter now, less certain. You came to the house with those papers. You said. I brought information about grief counseling, I said. For both of you. I thought it might help. Emma was looking back and forth between us, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. The baby had gone quiet again, but I could see its tiny chest rising and falling rapidly, and I was growing more concerned about the little one's condition with each passing moment. The money, Emma said suddenly, and both Marcus and I turned to look at her. Daddy, what happened to the money Grandma left for me? The college fund. Marcus went very still. In the silence that followed, I could hear nothing but the rain drumming on the tent and the distant sound of traffic from the street beyond the alley. What college fund? I asked, though something cold was starting to form in the pit of my stomach. Emma's eyes never left her father's face. The one Mom told me about before she died. She said Grandma Helen had set up a college fund for me. She said there was enough money to pay for school and help me get started in life. She said. Emma's voice broke. She said it was Grandma's way of making sure I'd be okay even after she was gone. I felt the world tilt sideways. I had set up a college fund for Emma. A substantial one. I'd put nearly $200,000 into it over the years, money I'd saved from my late husband's life insurance and my own careful investments. It was supposed to be Emma's safety net, her ticket to whatever future she wanted to build. Marcus, I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Where is Emma's college fund? He was backing away now, his face pale and panicked. There were expenses. After Sarah died, there were so many expenses. The medical bills, the funeral costs. The fund was separate from all that, I said, taking a step toward him. It was in a trust. You couldn't have touched it unless he'd had Emma sign papers when she turned 18. Unless he'd convinced her that I was dead and that he was her only family. Unless he'd forged documents or found some other way to access money that was never meant for him. Oh my God, Emma whispered, and when I looked at her, I saw understanding dawning in her eyes. Oh my God, Daddy, what did you do? The baby started crying again, and this time the sound was weaker than before. Emma looked down at the little one with growing panic, and I realized that we were dealing with more than just family drama here. That baby needed medical attention, and it needed it soon. Emma, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. How long has the baby been sick? 3 days, she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. Maybe 4. I've been trying to keep her warm, but the tent leaks, and I don't have any money for formula, and... She broke off, looking up at Marcus with an expression that was equal parts accusation and desperation. You said you were going to get help. You said you were going to find us somewhere to stay. Marcus was still backing away, and I could see the exact moment when he made the decision to run. His eyes darted toward the mouth of the alley, calculating distances and escape routes. Don't, I said, and there was steel in my voice that surprised even me. Don't you dare run away from this, Marcus. Don't you dare leave your daughter and grandchild here while you save yourself. But he was already turning, already splashing through the puddles toward the street. I started after him, but my 73-year-old legs were no match for his desperation. Within seconds, he had disappeared around the corner, leaving nothing but the sound of his footsteps echoing off the wet pavement. I turned back to Emma, who was staring at the spot where her father had been with an expression of complete devastation. The baby in her arms had gone ominously quiet. Emma, I said, dropping to my knees beside the tent despite the water soaking through my pants. We need to get the baby to the hospital. Right now. She looked at me with eyes that seemed far older than her years. I don't have insurance. I don't have money. They'll just turn us away. No, they won't, I said firmly. I'll make sure of that. But we need to move now. Emma hesitated for a moment, looking at me as if she still couldn't quite believe I was real. Then she nodded and started to crawl out of the tent, clutching the baby against her chest. As I helped her to her feet, I caught a glimpse of the inside of the tent. A few pieces of clothing, an empty baby bottle, and something that made my heart clench, a small framed photo of Sarah that Emma had somehow managed to keep with her through everything. Grandma, Emma said as we started toward the hospital entrance, and hearing her call me that after all these years nearly broke me. Is it really you? Are you really alive? I'm really alive, sweetheart, I said, wrapping my arm around her shoulders as we walked. And I'm never letting you go again. But even as I said it, I could feel the weight of all the questions that still needed answers. The money that had disappeared. The lies that had been told. The years that had been stolen from both of us. And somewhere out there in the rain, Marcus was running with secrets that I was only beginning to understand. The baby made a small, weak sound, and Emma's grip on the little one tightened. We were almost to the hospital doors when Emma suddenly stopped walking. "Grandma," she said, and her voice was filled with a terror that had nothing to do with the rain or the cold. "There's something else. Something about the money that you need to know." I looked at her, waiting. "It wasn't just my college fund," she whispered. "There was more. A lot more. And I think Daddy might have done something that's going to get us all in trouble." The automatic doors of the hospital slid open in front of us, spilling warm light and the smell of antiseptic into the rainy night. But I couldn't move. I could only stand there, holding my granddaughter and great-grandchild, as the full scope of Marcus's betrayal began to reveal itself. What else had he taken? What other lies had he told? And what kind of trouble were we walking into? The fluorescent lights in the emergency room made everything look harsh and unforgiving, but at least we were warm and dry. Emma sat beside me in the waiting area, her wet clothes slowly steaming in the heated air, while somewhere behind the double doors marked authorized personnel only, doctors were examining her baby. Our baby. My great-granddaughter, whose name I still didn't know. "Lily," Emma said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. "Her name is Lily Sarah. After Mom." I felt tears prick at my eyes. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Emma nodded, but her attention was focused on the doors where Lily had disappeared 20 minutes ago. A nurse had taken one look at the baby's pale, listless condition and whisked her away immediately, leaving us with nothing but forms to fill out and the terrible weight of waiting. I'd handled the insurance questions, giving them my information and making it clear that I would be responsible for all costs. The relief on Emma's face when she realized she wouldn't be turned away had been heartbreaking to witness. Now we sat in the uncomfortable plastic chairs, surrounded by the usual emergency room chaos, crying children, worried parents, the occasional drunk sleeping it off in the corner. But all I could focus on was my granddaughter, who looked so much like Sarah at that age it made my chest ache. "Tell me about the money," I said gently. "What did your father do?" Emma was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "After I turned 18, he came to me with these papers. He said they were from your estate, that you'd left me an inheritance, but there were legal complications. He said the lawyers needed my signature to release the funds, and that he would handle everything for me since I was still in high school and didn't understand legal stuff." My hands clenched in my lap. "What kind of papers?" "I don't know." I was 17, almost 18, and I was so messed up about everything. We'd been evicted from our house, we were living in this awful motel, and Daddy kept saying that once we got the inheritance money, everything would be okay. He said we'd be able to get a nice place to live, and I could go to college like Mom always wanted. She paused, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I trusted him. He was all I had left, you know? So I signed whatever he put in front of me." "How much money are we talking about, Emma?" He said it was around $50,000. Enough for a down payment on a house and maybe a year or two of community college. Emma's voice grew bitter. "But that was 5 years ago, and I never saw a penny of it. Every time I asked about it, he had some excuse. The lawyers were still working on it, or there were tax issues, or the money was tied up in some kind of investment." $50,000. He told her 50,000 when the actual amount was 4 times that. My stomach churned as I began to understand the scope of his deception. "Emma, there's something you need to know about that inheritance." She looked at me with those familiar brown eyes, and I could see the fear there. Fear of more bad news, more betrayal, more disappointment. "The college fund I set up for you wasn't $50,000, I said carefully. "It was closer to 200,000. And that wasn't the only money." Emma went very still. "What do you mean?" "When your mother got sick, I liquidated most of my investments to help pay for her treatments. But after she died, I put what was left into accounts for you. The college fund, yes, but also a trust that was supposed to mature when you turned 25. And there was life insurance money from your mother's policy that I was holding for you. I watched the color drain from Emma's face as she processed this information. How much? She asked, and her voice was so quiet I had to lean closer to hear her. Total? Probably close to $400,000. Emma made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. She doubled over in her chair, pressing her hands to her face, and for a moment I thought she might be sick. 400,000, she repeated, her voice muffled by her hands. $400,000, and I've been living in a tent. I've been feeding my baby watered-down formula because I couldn't afford the real thing. She broke off, her shoulders shaking. I reached over and pulled her against me, feeling how thin she'd become, how fragile. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I didn't know. I should have checked on you. I should have found a way to. It's not your fault, Emma said fiercely, pulling back to look at me. It's his. It's all his fault. But Grandma, there's more. There's something else you need to know. Before she could continue, a doctor in scrubs approached us. She was a young woman with kind eyes and tired smile, and I could tell immediately that she had good news. Ms. Patterson, she said, looking at Emma. I'm Dr. Chun. I've been examining Lily. Emma shot to her feet. Is she okay? Please tell me she's okay. She's going to be fine, Dr. Chun said, and I watched the tension drain out of Emma's body. She's dehydrated and underweight, but there's no sign of serious illness. We're giving her 4 fluids now, and she should be ready to go home in a few hours. Home, Emma repeated, and there was such pain in that single word. Dr. Chen's expression grew more serious. I do need to ask, have you been having trouble accessing adequate nutrition for the baby? Her weight suggests she hasn't been getting enough calories. Emma's face flushed with shame. I've been doing the best I can. I've been stretching the formula, adding extra water to make it last longer, but I know that's not. I know I shouldn't have. Hey, Dr. Chen said gently, reaching out to touch Emma's arm. I'm not judging you. I can see that you love your daughter very much. But I need to make sure you have the resources to care for her properly going forward. She does now, I said firmly, standing up to join the conversation. I'm her grandmother, and I'll make sure both Emma and Lily have everything they need. Dr. Chen looked between us, and I could see her taking in our wet clothes, Emma's obvious exhaustion, the whole story that was written in our appearances. Are you in a safe living situation now? She asked Emma directly. Emma looked at me, and I could see the question in her eyes. Was this real? Could she trust that I wouldn't disappear again, that I wouldn't turn out to be another lie? Yes, I said before Emma could answer. They're coming home with me. Tonight. Dr. Chen nodded, seeming satisfied. Good. I'll have the nurse give you some information about proper nutrition for babies Lily's age, and I'd like to see her back here in a week for a follow-up. But she's going to be just fine. After the doctor left, Emma sank back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. I can't believe I almost killed her, she whispered. I can't believe I was so stupid. I should have brought her here days ago, but I was scared they'd take her away from me. I was scared they'd say I was an unfit mother. You're not an unfit mother, I said firmly. You're a young woman who was put in an impossible situation by someone who should have been protecting you. You did the best you could with what you had. Emma looked up at me, and I could see the war going on behind her eyes, the desire to believe me fighting against years of disappointment and betrayal. Grandma, there's something else about the money. Something that's going to make this whole situation a lot more complicated. I settled back in my chair, preparing myself for whatever new revelation was coming. About 6 months ago, Daddy came to me in a panic. He said there had been some kind of mistake with the inheritance money, and that the government was asking questions. He said there might be an investigation, and that I needed to be prepared to answer questions about what I knew. A cold dread was starting to form in my stomach. What kind of questions? About whether I'd actually received the money. About whether I knew it had been, what did he call it, misappropriated. Emma's voice was getting smaller with each word. He made me practice answers. He told me exactly what to say if anyone asked. He said if I didn't stick to the story, we could both go to prison. Emma, I said carefully, did your father ever ask you to sign any other documents? Anything besides those initial inheritance papers? She nodded miserably. Tax forms. Bank documents. He said it was all part of managing the inheritance. I signed whatever he put in front of me because I trusted him, and because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't. I closed my eyes, feeling the full weight of the situation settling on my shoulders. Marcus hadn't just stolen Emma's inheritance, he'd made her an unwitting accomplice in whatever scheme he'd been running. And if there was already a government investigation... Grandma. Emma's voice was small and frightened. Am I in trouble? Could I really go to prison? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message. I pulled it out, expecting to see something from one of my friends at the hospital volunteer program. Instead, I saw a number I didn't recognize and a message that made my blood run cold. Stop looking for answers or Emma pays the price. Some secrets are better left buried. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. How did anyone even know I'd found Emma? We'd only been at the hospital for an hour, and the only person who knew we were here was... Emma, I said slowly, when your father ran away tonight, did he have his phone with him? She nodded. He always has his phone. Why? I showed her the text message, watching her face go pale as she read it. Who would send something like that? She whispered. I don't know. But I think your father might have gotten himself involved with some very dangerous people. Emma was quiet for a moment, staring at the message. Then she looked up at me with an expression that was equal parts fear and determination. There's something else, she said. Something I haven't told you yet. About a week ago, these men came looking for Daddy. They found our tent, and they were asking questions about money he owed them. They said if he didn't pay up soon, they were going to start collecting from his family instead. My heart stopped. What kind of men? The kind that carry guns, Emma said quietly. The kind that made it very clear they weren't just going to ask nicely twice. I looked around the emergency room, suddenly seeing potential threats in every face, every shadow. If Marcus had borrowed money from dangerous people, if he'd used Emma's inheritance as collateral. We need to get out of here, I said, standing up abruptly. As soon as Lily is discharged, we need to leave. Where are we going to go? My house for tonight. But Emma, I think we're going to need help. Professional help. She looked at me with confusion. What do you mean? I mean, I think it's time to call the police. Emma's eyes went wide with panic. No. Grandma, you don't understand. Daddy said if I ever talked to the police about any of this, they'd arrest me too. He said I signed the papers, so I'm just as guilty as he is. That's not true, I said firmly. You were a minor when this started, and you were lied to about what you were signing. Any lawyer worth their salt could. I stopped mid-sentence as a new thought occurred to me. A thought that made everything else seem suddenly terrifyingly clear. Emma, I said slowly, how old were you when you signed those first inheritance papers? I told you, I was almost 18. It was right before my birthday. But you said your father told you I died when you were 12. If you thought I was dead for 6 years, how did you think there could be an inheritance? Emma opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. I could see her working through the timeline, realizing the same thing I had just figured out. He told me you died recently, she said slowly. He said you'd been sick for a long time, and that you died just a few months before my 18th birthday. He said that's why there was an inheritance, because you just passed away. But Emma, if I'd just died, how would there have been time for lawyers to process an estate? How would there have been time for legal complications that required your signature? She stared at me, and I could see the moment when the full scope of her father's deception hit her. Not just the stolen money, not just the lies about my death, but the elaborate years-long con he'd been running on his own daughter. He planned this, she whispered. From the very beginning, he planned this. He told me you were dead, so I wouldn't try to contact you. He waited until I was 18 so I could legally sign documents. He made up the whole story about the inheritance so I wouldn't question why I was signing papers. I nodded grimly. And then he used your signature to access not just the college fund, but probably every other account I'd set up for you. Emma was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. How could he do this to me? How could he do this to his own daughter? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. You have 24 hours to stop asking questions. After that, we start with the baby. This time, Emma saw the message as I read it. Her face went white, and she grabbed my arm with a grip that was almost painful. They know about Lily, she whispered. Oh God, they know about Lily. I looked around the emergency room again, this time with the certain knowledge that we were being watched. Somewhere in this building, or somewhere nearby, someone was keeping track of our movements. Someone who was willing to threaten a baby to keep their secret safe. We're leaving, I said, standing up and pulling Emma with me. Right now. But Lily. We'll take her with us. I'll sign whatever discharge papers they need, but we're not staying here another minute. As we hurried toward the nurse's station, I found myself thinking about the text messages. About the men with guns who had been looking for Marcus. About the government investigation Emma had mentioned. Whatever Marcus had gotten himself into, it was bigger than just stealing his daughter's inheritance. And now Emma and Lily were caught in the middle of it. But there was something else bothering me, something that didn't quite fit. If these people were so dangerous, if they were willing to threaten a baby, why were they giving us 24 hours? Why not just take what they wanted immediately? Unless they needed something from us. Unless there was something only Emma or I could give them. As we waited for the discharge paperwork, I found myself thinking about all the documents Emma had signed over the years. All the papers Marcus had put in front of her, telling her they were routine legal forms. What if they weren't routine at all? What if Marcus had been using Emma's signature for something much bigger than just accessing her inheritance? And what if the people who were threatening us weren't just trying to collect a debt? What if they were trying to cover up a crime that went far beyond anything I'd imagined? The nurse handed me Lily's discharge papers, and I signed them quickly, my hand shaking slightly. Emma took the baby, who looked much better after the 4 fluids, and we headed for the exit. As we walked through the automatic doors into the parking garage, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something much more dangerous than a simple family dispute over money. But I also knew that I wasn't going to let anyone hurt my granddaughter or great-granddaughter. Not after I'd just found them again. Whatever Marcus had done, whatever trouble he'd brought down on all of us, we were going to face it together. Even if it killed me. My house felt like a fortress when we finally pulled into the driveway at nearly midnight. I'd driven the long way home, taking side streets and doubling back twice to make sure we weren't being followed. Emma sat in the passenger seat clutching Lily, both of them finally asleep after the exhaustion of the evening caught up with them. Looking at them in the dim light from my porch, I felt a fierce protectiveness surge through me. These were my girls, my family, and I'd be damned if I was going to let anyone hurt them. I gently shook Emma awake. We're home, sweetheart. She blinked up at the house, a modest 2-story colonial that Harold and I had bought 40 years ago, and I saw something like wonder cross her face. It looks exactly the same, she whispered. I used to dream about this house. After Daddy moved us away, I used to dream about coming back here. Well, now you're here for real, I said, helping her out of the car. And you're staying as long as you want. Inside, I got them settled in Sarah's old room. I'd kept it mostly the same after she died, the same pale yellow walls, the same white furniture, the same photos on the dresser. Emma stood in the doorway for a long moment, just staring. Mom's room, she said softly. I thought you might like to stay here. But if it's too hard. No, Emma said quickly. It's perfect. It feels like she's still here somehow. I set up a makeshift crib for Lily using a dresser drawer lined with soft blankets, the way mothers had done for generations. The baby settled immediately, finally warm and safe and fed. Grandma, Emma said as I was tucking her into her mother's old bed, what are we going to do? About the money, about those people, about everything. Tomorrow we're going to start getting answers, I said firmly. But tonight, you're going to sleep. Both of you are safe here. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. I double-checked all the locks, closed all the curtains, and found myself looking out the windows more than once before I finally went to bed. I didn't sleep well. Every sound made me jump, the house settling, the wind in the trees, a car driving past on the street. Around 3 a.m, I gave up and went downstairs to make tea. That's when I found Emma sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a pile of papers spread out in front of her. I couldn't sleep either, she said without looking up. I kept thinking about everything Daddy made me sign over the years, so I wrote down everything I could remember. I sat down across from her, looking at the list she'd made. Bank documents, tax forms, insurance papers, investment transfers. It was extensive and damning. Emma, some of these aren't just about your inheritance. These are business documents. Corporate filings. She nodded miserably. I know. I looked them up on your computer. Daddy had me sign papers that made me a partner in some kind of investment company. And there are tax documents that show income one never received. My blood ran cold as I read through her list. Sweetheart, I think your father was using your identity to run some kind of financial scam. These documents, they make it look like you were actively involved in moving large amounts of money. That's what I was afraid of, Emma said, and her voice was barely a whisper. Grandma, what if those men who are threatening us aren't just loan sharks? What if they're people Daddy stole from using my name? Before I could answer, my phone rang. At 3:30 in the morning, a phone call could only mean bad news. I looked at the caller ID and felt my heart stop. It was Marcus. I answered on the second ring, putting it on speaker so Emma could hear. Helen, Marcus's voice was shaky, desperate. Thank God you answered. Where are you, Marcus? I kept my voice steady, controlled. I can't tell you that. But I need you to listen to me very carefully. You and Emma are in danger. Real danger. Emma leaned forward, her face pale in the kitchen light. Daddy? Daddy, where have you been? Do you know what you've done to us? Emma, baby, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just trying to take care of you, to make sure we had enough money to survive after your mom died. By stealing from me? Emma's voice was rising. By lying to me about Grandma being dead? By making me sign papers that I didn't understand? You don't understand, Marcus said, and I could hear the panic in his voice. It started small. I just borrowed a little from your college fund to pay for your mom's funeral. I was going to pay it back, I swear. But then there were other expenses, and the house was in foreclosure, and I met these people who said they could help me invest the money and make it grow. What people? I asked. They called themselves financial consultants. They said they could triple the money in 6 months, guaranteed. All I had to do was put Emma's inheritance into their investment fund. Emma made a sound of pure anguish. You gambled with my future. It wasn't gambling. Marcus protested. They had credentials, references. They showed me documents proving their success rate. But it was all fake. The whole thing was a Ponzi scheme, and by the time I realized it, your money was gone and I owed them even more. I felt sick. How much more? $2 million, Marcus whispered. They said I was responsible for the full amount because I'd brought in other investors. People who lost their life savings because I vouched for these criminals. Emma was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. So you made me sign more papers. You used my identity to try to get more money. I was desperate, Marcus said. They were threatening to kill me. They said if I didn't find a way to pay them back, they'd go after you instead. So when they suggested using your identity to secure loans, to create shell companies that could move money around, I thought I could fix everything before you ever found out. But you couldn't, I said. And now they're threatening Emma and Lily. That's why I'm calling, Marcus said urgently. They don't just want money anymore. They want something else. Something that could put them all in prison if it comes to light. What are you talking about? The investment scheme wasn't just about stealing from individuals. They were laundering money for some very bad people. Drug dealers, human traffickers, people who needed a way to make dirty money look clean. And all of it went through accounts that have Emma's name on them. I felt the room spin around me. You're telling me that Emma is on paper as a money launderer for organized crime? I never meant for it to go that far, Marcus said, and he was crying now too. But once I started signing her name to things, they had leverage over me. They said if I tried to back out, they'd make sure Emma took the fall for everything. Emma stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. I can't listen to this anymore. I can't. She ran from the kitchen, and I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard Sarah's old bedroom door slam shut. You've destroyed her life, I said into the phone, my voice cold with fury. You've destroyed your own daughter's life to save yourself. I know, Marcus whispered. I know, and I hate myself for it. But Helen, you have to understand, these people don't just kill you when you cross them. They make you suffer first. They go after everyone you love. Then why are you calling me? Why aren't you turning yourself in to the police? Because the police can't protect you from these people. And because... He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Harder. Because there might be a way to fix this. What do you mean? The man who runs this operation, his name is Viktor Kozlov. He's got operations all over the East Coast, but he's been trying to go legitimate. Buy real businesses, clean up his image. The problem is, he's got all this dirty money tied up in accounts that Emma's name is on. I was beginning to see where this was going, and I didn't like it. What does he want? He wants Emma to sign transfer documents that will move all the money into accounts he controls directly. Clean accounts that can't be traced back to the criminal activity. If she does that, he'll let all of us walk away. And if she doesn't? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He'll make sure she takes the fall for everything. Money laundering, tax evasion, conspiracy. She could go to prison for the rest of her life. And that's if she's lucky. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices settling on my shoulders. How do we know he'll keep his word? How do we know he won't just kill us all once he has what he wants? We don't, Marcus admitted. But Helen, what choice do we have? If we go to the police, Emma gets arrested. If we run, he'll find us eventually. This is the only way. Where is this supposed to happen? Tomorrow night. There's an abandoned warehouse on the south side of town. He wants Emma to come alone, sign the papers, and walk away. No police, no lawyers, no witnesses. Absolutely not, I said immediately. I'm not letting Emma walk into that alone. Helen, if you try to interfere. Then what? He'll kill us? He's already threatening to do that. I stood up, pacing to the window and looking out at the dark street. Marcus, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I've spent the last 15 years thinking my granddaughter hated me. I've spent 15 years regretting that I didn't fight harder to stay in her life. I'm not going to lose her again. What are you saying? I'm saying that if Emma goes to that warehouse tomorrow night, I'm going with her. And I'm saying that we're not going in blind. Helen, these people will kill you without thinking twice about it. Maybe, I said. But I'm 73 years old, Marcus. I've lived my life. Emma's just starting hers, and she has a baby to think about. If someone has to take risks to protect them, it's going to be me. I hung up before he could respond and stood in my dark kitchen, thinking. Marcus was right about one thing, the police couldn't protect us from people like this. But that didn't mean we had to face them alone. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Detective Ray Morrison had been Harold's partner back when Harold was still on the force, before he retired and started the security business that had made us comfortable. Ray was retired now too, but he still had connections, still knew people who could help. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy with sleep. Helen? What's wrong? Ray, I need your help. And I need you to not ask too many questions until I'm finished explaining. Okay, he said, and I could hear him sitting up, becoming alert. Talk to me. I told him everything. About finding Emma, about the stolen money, about the threats and the warehouse meeting. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Jesus, Helen, Ray finally said. You've really stepped in it this time. Can you help us? I can try. But Helen, what you're talking about, going up against organized crime, this isn't something you handle with a few phone calls to old friends. Then what do you suggest? Give me until tomorrow evening. Let me make some calls, see what kind of backup we can arrange. But Helen, you have to promise me something. What? Promise me you won't do anything stupid. Don't try to be a hero. These people will kill you just to make a point. I promise, I said, though we both knew it was a lie. After I hung up, I went upstairs to check on Emma and Lily. They were both asleep, Emma curled around the baby protectively even in sleep. Looking at them, I felt that fierce protectiveness surge through me again. Tomorrow night, we would face whatever was waiting for us at that warehouse. But we wouldn't face it alone, and we wouldn't face it unprepared. I went back downstairs and spent the rest of the night planning. By the time the sun came up, I had made a dozen phone calls, arranged for backup that Marcus and his criminal friends would never see coming, and prepared for what might be the last fight of my life. But as I watched the sun rise through my kitchen window, I realized something that surprised me. For the first time in 15 years, I felt truly alive. I had my family back, and I was going to do whatever it took to keep them safe. Even if it meant walking into hell itself. The warehouse meeting was still 18 hours away, but I was already counting down the minutes. By tomorrow night, this would all be over, one way or another. And Emma and Lily would be free to start the life they deserved, with all the money that was rightfully theirs, and all the love I had been saving up for 15 long years. I just had to make sure I lived long enough to see it happen. As I started making breakfast for my girls, I found myself humming an old song Harold used to sing. Something about coming home, about family, about the things that matter most in life. Outside, the world was waking up to a new day. And for the first time in years, I was looking forward to whatever that day might bring. Even if it brought danger. Even if it brought violence. Even if it brought the end of everything. Because my granddaughter was upstairs sleeping in her mother's old bed, and my great-granddaughter was safe and warm and fed, and sometimes that's all the victory an old woman can ask for. The rest, we'd figure out as we went along. Together.